You know that moment when someone names something about you that you've never had words for, and suddenly you feel seen? Seen in a way that's not necessarily flattering or critical, just really real. That's what this podcast is about.
On every episode of Seen by Birkman, we explore real stories, practical applications, and honest conversations about what it actually looks like to be understood through the power of perception.
Not as a label, not as a type, but as a whole person.
This is a place where human data meets human depth.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Torri.
And this is Seen by Birkman.
Welcome back to Seen by Birkman. Today we're going to explore another one of those big themes that comes up for people when they start learning about Birkman and using Birkman, and that is the idea of using Birkman for leadership. Why don't you kick us off with where the question begins when people learn about Birkman?
Yes. So, as we were kind of talking about this episode and thinking about, because it comes up so much. And so when you're working with an executive team, and so most of the time when we go in, we're being brought in for the day, right? And we have a team. And so we spend the day with the team. Sometimes they've had no exposure to Birkman. And so a good part of the day is, obviously working with them and going through their Birkman data. But from a consultant point of view, you kind of see their belief and trust in the tool and the process, and they get more invested and they get more engaged. And by the end, the truth is they're usually like, this was one of the best workshops the executive team has ever had because of the Birkman. And once they kind of arrive at that place where it's like, if this tool could do this for the team, and if it has this level of insight for the team, the natural next step is like, wow, think what this could do for identifying a leader. And so I would say, one of the more common requests we get is do you have a leadership profile? So what is the profile for a leader? And the answer is there isn't one. And so, and just to kind of illuminate that a little bit more, first, let me say this. This is a topic I'm very passionate about because I think there's so much misinformation out there, and there is so much desire for there to be this profile, right? Not just for Birkman, but for any assessment. And I just want to position it this way. If an assessment could predict if someone would be a good leader, everybody would know the name of that company because Everybody would be using that product. Because having a good leader in the right seat at the right time at the right company, there is no better formula for success in an organization, right? You could take a good leader and put them almost in any company in any industry, and if they were going to be successful, if there was a possibility to predict that, there'd be nothing more valuable to an organization.
So why is having a profile for a leader the holy grail for organizations?
It is the holy grail, and it's the holy grail meaning it doesn't exist. And it's because leadership has a multiplying effect on the organization, both in a positive direction and in a negative direction. Mm-hmm. So when you have a strong leader at the top, it causes everything under them to align, right? So you have increased engagement, you have a stronger culture, you have less turnover. So it's not just that they're a good leader, it's that their leadership impacts the entire organization that they're over or the entire team that they're over. In the same way, a poor leader does the exact same thing, but in the opposite direction. So it's not just like not being a good leader is back to neutral. It actually goes just as significantly in the opposite direction. So they're horrible for the culture. People leave because they don't like the leader. People are disengaged. You're dealing with, toxicity and friction with employees. And so now all the time the organization is spending that they should be spending on the business of the business is being spent on trying to manage and mitigate the effects of a poor leader.
Right. And as you've just mentioned, there's so much weighing and relying on the person who is sitting in that seat, that what organizations are looking for oftentimes is certainty
Yes.
and guaranteed success, because they know the impact that the person in that seat is going to have.
Yes, and that is why companies are willing to spend tons of money on selection, because if you can even just mitigate that risk, there's a huge ROI to that. But if you could find the formula for that, again, that would be the holy grail.
Right.
And it doesn't exist.
Right. Especially as it relates to a certain personality profile.
Yes.
And I think that's the piece that we feel strongly about, that there is no one personality profile that is going to guarantee success for a leader role in a company.
Right. And we've talked about this before on previous podcasts, but just because a leader had success at one company doesn't mean anything about whether they'll have success at another company, even in the same industry.
Right.
Right. So you can look at different companies and different case studies, and just because someone was incredibly successful at one point in time as a leader at one company, that doesn't predict at all whether or not they're going to be able to do that over and over again at even companies that are similar, let alone different companies or different industries.
Right. Because there are so many variables. So organizations do want to be able to identify a leader profile. Let's talk about the idea that people think it's going to mitigate risk, but actually it's going to introduce a new type of risk. Say more about that.
Right. So I think this is fascinating. And to your point, companies want to use some type of selection profiling tool because in their mind, they are lessening the risk of a bad hire. And maybe sometimes they do. But what's actually really interesting about that is that when you're hiring to a sort of profile, or if you've identified what you think is the right type of person to work at your organization, and you keep hiring that person, or even people that just, from a Birkman standpoint, kind of see the world the same way or think the same way, you're starting to over-index what that person is focusing on or values, right? So it's like that is great that person is focused and oriented towards that direction. But if you keep hiring that same person, now you have a bunch of people that are too focused on a particular area. But even more concerning is you're doubling down on the blind spots. So we're also, now we have people that are not paying attention to the same thing. So you're creating these huge gaps in what the company is not doing. And you're going to be over-indexing what the company maybe was doing well. And what's interesting about that is you're actually introducing a huge amount of risk into the company because you're losing diversity. Diversity of thought is the most important thing to an organization. And I think we're going to sound like broken records because this is going to keep coming up. But in the moment of AI, you need diverse thinkers more than ever. You need people that are thinking differently because, as we know, the AI model is trained on what is the most common, point of view or the most common answer. And that's not going to be helpful. You need the person that doesn't think that way. And if you keep hiring the same person, you're actually introducing a massive amount of risk. And as we were talking about this episode, I was actually, I think 2 years ago, working with a hedge fund, and I had this conversation with them because they wanted the profile for a leader. So someone had taken the Birkman. They're like, wow, this is amazing. You should develop a profile for a leader. And so we had a conversation, and he actually wanted me to come speak to the board about this concept because it was like so compelling to him. Because of course, if you're a hedge fund, this is all you care about.
Right. It's really interesting that you brought up AI because I think that a lot of ways that companies are using artificial intelligence right now feels like it comes from this same mindset that we're trying to shift around leadership selection, which is that kind of just getting to the right answer faster, even though it may not be the right answer. It feels like it is. It feels like there's more certainty. It feels like the success is more guaranteed. And maybe for a moment it is, but long term, you have actually done more harm than good because you went for that almost instant gratification of seeing check on all of these different personality traits when really they didn't have the skills to actually practice the leadership that the organization needed.
Well, I love that because also the answer the AI gives sounds so good.
Exactly.
So it's very easy to be
it's
like,
so enticing,
it's so
because it
enticing.
looks so good on paper.
And that's the right word for it. Trying to find a profile for a leader is enticing. And if you're a business owner, again, you need to pause and think, if this did exist, why isn't this $1 trillion company? Because it should be.
Right.
And what risk am I introducing by wanting the false security of a profile? Because to me, my opinion is it's absolutely, it's a false sense of security because you think you're minimizing risk. And it's like you're not only not minimizing risk, you're actually introducing a whole nother stream of risk into your organization
that you weren't even aware of.
And
I think
and if
that's a
you
really
think
good
you're
point.
doing something to help, you're not even looking for that risk, right? So that's a very dangerous type of risk.
Right. That's a really good point. And I think the premise of where you're coming from with this is that if an organization is focused only on the profile of a leader, then they're missing the bigger point around the ongoing development of a leader. And it feels like if you find the right personality profile for a leader, then you won't have to continue to put in the ongoing work of making sure that they are practicing leadership.
Because you found the leader.
Because we found the leader.
You're the leader.
Like, there you are. And
You
actually,
lead.
I loved what you said yesterday about the dating app parallel.
Oh, right.
And I think that would be great to bring up right now because it's the same mindset that people have.
So would you meet like other I'm trying to think, when does that come? Does it always just come up?
With anybody.
It just cracks me up how people will come in and they'll be like, I have the best idea. And they're like, this is going to blow you away. You need a Birkman dating app. And it's like, no, it won't work. Like, to think that if we found a couple that has a great marriage and we're like, okay, this is what we want to replicate, and we go out and find their matching Birkmans and put those people together, the chance that there's going to be synergy or chemistry or whatever is 0.001%, because it's like, again, what creates a healthy, positive, romantic relationship isn't just how you see the world. There's so many other variables that go into it. And but again, it shows you where people go. And I do think it's a compliment to the Birkman, because they're like, oh, this can do that. And it's interesting how quickly people go there. But it's also like, again, finding a partner is a hard problem to solve, right? Finding a good leader.
It's high stakes.
High stakes,
and people are really invested in it, and they think there is a perfect person.
Yeah.
And yes, I think that we would say that there are certain aspects of somebody's behaviors and expectations and even their interests that are definitely going to color the way that they approach leadership.
Right.
And we can look at somebody's Birkman and say, yes, this person is going to have more of a bias for action. This person is going to be really focused on getting it right and making sure all of the details are in place. That doesn't mean that that is the only type of person, though, that can be a leader. And even more, that is not going to guarantee success.
Right.
In the same way that looking at two people's Birkmans in a romantic relationship is going to guarantee that they have a perfect relationship.
You just said something that I didn't put together yesterday, but you're exactly right, which is, it's the belief that there's a perfect person.
Yeah.
And if you could find the perfect person, then the marriage wouldn't be work.
Right. It takes away all the work.
But it's like, that doesn't exist.
No.
There's no marriage where people are like, we just found each other and it was all easy after that.
Yes.
It's not like that. And if you if you think it's going to be like that, you're
in for even more.
Yeah, you're in for it because it's not going to be that way, right?
Even if you have found the perfect person on paper, it's still going to be work.
Right. So I didn't even think about that parallel, but that's actually really interesting. And it's that's what you're looking for. There is no ability just to select a perfect person because that person doesn't exist. No matter what, that person's going to need development and education, and they have a learning curve.
Right.
And you're going to have to figure out the people that they're working with and the industry. And again, like, why is it not possible? There are just too many variables that have to be accounted for.
Right.
And I'll say this too. It doesn't exist today. Now, again, being at an interesting moment in time, maybe in 10 years with AI, it's able to take in so many data points. I don't know. It's hard to know where we can go with AI right now. But I feel confident that today, with the tools that are out there, from a profiling perspective,
as it relates to like Birkman and personality and that type of profile,
right? And if you when you really kind of start to sit with it, it's like, if there were a profile for a leader, that would mean when they were born, they already had like the composition to be a leader. But if you think about leaders that you've had, whether they're good or bad, or let's focus on the good ones right now. They went through a lot of life experiences and education and trial and error and probably pain. And that is the education that they got to be a good leader. And it's not just like it is. It was created over time. It was created based on where they were working, what experiences they were having. So someone who you might say is a phenomenal leader when they're 50, they weren't that leader when they were 25.
Right.
And I think if you start to really look at it that way, it starts to make sense of like, oh, it is more obvious why it couldn't be possible.
Right. Okay, so what we've gotten to so far is that if organizations are really focused or almost have tunnel vision on finding the perfect leader based on a personality type, they're almost missing the bigger point around the work that has to go into the ongoing development and the practice of leadership.
Right.
And yes, like we said, it is enticing to have certainty, to have a formula for success, to feel like this isn't going to be an ongoing effort that someone has to partake in and be left less of a lift on the organization. There is nuance in the argument that we're making, in that, of course, we know that some people are going to want to be in leadership positions more than others, depending on the company and the team and the industry, that some people will be more of a fit. But again, you can't narrow it down to a leadership profile for every industry and every team because the variables are always changing.
Yeah, and as we're talking about this, I actually was thinking there's two different parts to this, because there is the request for a leadership profile, but there's also the request for developing a personalized profile for leadership in your organization. And so those are kind of the two different points, is that there is no leadership profile because that would just be impossible.
There's no profile for a leader.
A leader. Yes, that's right. There's no profile for a leader. Like you could kind of do for a salesperson or an accountant, right? We wouldn't advise that, but that's how people are trying to think of it. It's like, if I can create a profile for a customer sale,
or like an engineer or something like that.
Because we could see SKUs and we could kind of do a profile.
Yes, exactly.
And say, you do see the world like an engineer, or you approach the world like a salesperson.
Right.
And so when people are trying to use it that way as a leader, that does not exist.
Right.
Period. End of story.
Right.
The other part, though, is that the second request is, can you help me develop a personalized psychometric profile for a leader in my organization? And when you go that direction, that's where you are now introducing risk, because you are hiring the same person over and over again. And that's the other part where now you've invested money, you've created a psychometric this is getting very scientific, right? So it's like, this is good. Like we're creating the formula for success.
I see.
And we've invested, and it's specific to our company. And that's where you are now paying money to have a hiring process that is introducing, in my opinion, a greater risk to your organization than bringing in a person that is a leader, that is hired to be a leader that you are going to develop to be the best version of themselves.
So I think what you're saying is that when companies are in the hiring process, yes, we want to get an idea of their motivations and how they're going to be behaving and their expectations. In addition to that, we know that emotional intelligence, cognitive intelligence, education, and how they've been able to apply that to other leadership endeavors is going to be more predictive than being able to rely on a personality profile.
Yes.
Of course, we as Birkman believe very greatly in the power of development and understanding how those strengths might become overused, how blind spots might actually expose the organization to great risks. And so if you continue to hire that same person, then the overused strength and the blind spot is going to get even bigger.
Yes. And that's not good for the organization, right?
Right.
There's very little path to success if that's the approach.
Right. So if one of the big ideas for what we're talking about right now is that we want to be more focused on leadership as the ongoing practice and verb versus a leader as a noun just representing a title or someone with authority, then what does it mean to practice leadership? What are some things that business owners and organizations should be focused on to be able to strengthen the leadership in their company?
Yeah, and it would be kind of the beginning part of what you just said. So working on self-awareness. Do they know themselves? Do they know their people? Do they understand that every person needs a different kind of support? Working with them on their emotional intelligence, and just, it's all of the education and the development. And that's not a course, and that's not even a year program. That is an ongoing, you don't reach that, right? And
Right.
because, so I think what we would say is leadership is creating the environment where people can be successful. And that would include things like identifying the purpose, creating clarity for the team, creating an environment of psychological safety. And in the same way, you don't reach clarity, and you don't reach, you don't like one day go,
Now we have clarity
we've
and
got
we're
it.
done.
We're done.
Check.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next thing.
Yep.
It's like you can get there. I always tell people you can get there today, but tomorrow it starts over.
Right.
And that's the same with psychological safety. The other thing we know about psychological safety and trust is it takes a long time to build those things, and it takes a very short time to destroy those things. And so in the same way that if leadership is creating an environment for your people to be successful, creating an environment is an ongoing activity. It's not like you make your little ecosystem and then you're like, it's like you build a house and you're like, the house is.
Unfortunately, there's a little too much volatility in the world today to be able to do something once and think it's going to last forever.
Well, and we've been talking about this for 10 years. And so in a way, it's like, well, we've known this. But again, it's like, it's just this moment in time. It's such an interesting moment where all of these things that have been true are about to be accelerated at a rate that's kind of dizzying.
So that's an important point as well, because I think, however many decades ago, maybe you could have said this is the type of person who is more likely to look like a leader and to be successful. And because of the ongoing volatility and uncertainty and just so much change with technology and interdependency, I think that this way of thinking about leadership as an ongoing practice versus a type of person is even more important today because of the changes in the environment. And I think the idea of thinking about it as like, if leadership is like this big umbrella practice, then what you said, practicing your own self-development and working on managing your own emotions and self-regulation, and then developing other people, combined with creating purpose, clarity, and psychological safety for the team, because you can't ever arrive at that, then those are 5 big things that people can focus on to be able to practice leadership in a way that is going to move people and the organization forward.
And like, think about each of those things that you just named are hard to do.
Yeah,
Each
they're
one of them.
super
Like, you
hard.
could commit to just one of those and just only focus on one for like 10 years and it would still, they're not, they are very challenging. And I think that's really interesting to talk about, you know, like in the 50s or 60s, would this conversation be the same? And it probably wouldn't, because
I don't think that
leader,
it would at
I think
all.
leader was a title. You got that title. But the other thing is, you stayed at a company your entire
Right.
career. So once you got to be a leader, you really did know the ins and outs of the organization. And it was more static. It
Right.
wasn't so.
It was at least stable.
It was stable.
Like, maybe it wasn't static, but
Right.
it was stable. And
Yes.
so, like, you saw generations of leaders before
You
you,
saw
and
the
you
good ones
learned
and-
the ropes,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you climbed the same ladder
Yeah.
that they did. And like, there are no ropes. There is no ladder.
Yeah.
There isn't much stable about organizations right now. And
Right.
so to even look up to people who have been successful, to see the behaviors that they inhibited at that time, I think there aren't people who have really come before, you know, you in this way right now, because so much has changed. Where
Right.
previously it was like, well, if I could learn to speak up in meetings like this person does and remain very calm in high stakes situations, and to follow through on the plan, and to make a decision and feel confident about it, and like,
Yeah.
you know, just look very polished and poised and put together and charismatic, then I am going to continue to climb the corporate
Ooh,
ladder.
The charismatic is an interesting point, right? Because we love
That's a whole trail we could go
yeah,
down.
that's a whole episode, because we love charismatic
We love
people,
charisma.
and we love associating competence with charisma, and so that's a whole nother point of this, where
Yep.
you know, you not only have your profile tell, but the person comes in and and it's like, yes, this is
Yeah.
you are it. We have found you.
You've sold yourself into this job.
And think about what you're setting that person up for, like the expectation that they're going to walk in. And I think that is also why the honeymoon period is so short for a leader, because if I've invested a lot of money on a hiring process, and you come in and you wow me, I'm expecting a lot from you, and I'm not thinking I need to develop you. I mean, I think that's kind of one of the biggest points here, is that if you are a leader, you don't need the development, right? But if you are coming in and you have to practice leadership, you are going to need support for that. It's you're going to need a coach, you're going to need feedback, you're going to need, you know, development and courses and information that's going to help you do that. And if you think you've hired somebody that doesn't need that, you're not going to put the energy or resources into that person.
Right.
And like, no wonder statistically they're likely to fail.
Right. So at this point, if you're listening, you've probably thought of different leaders that you've worked for. Hopefully some of them did practice leadership in productive ways, and others you might be thinking, oh, they would have really benefited from practicing leadership as opposed to just being someone with a title and in authority. How has this played out for you personally? Who are some people who you've seen practice leadership,
Yeah.
and what do you think stood out to you about them?
So let's think. I think that the first thing is, I think, the purpose, right? And I think a good leader can get people excited. They paint the vision. The vision is clear. Everybody's pointed towards the vision, and everybody knows how what they're doing contributes to the vision. And so that's engagement, right? That's excitement. We're all on the same team. And I you know, in my experience, one of the things that for me personally is the most impactful is when things felt uncertain and scary, or like they could go wrong. You were like, I'm okay because they're there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're at the front, and they and even they don't know. Like, even they're kind of like, it's a little uncertain, but we've got it and we're going to figure it out. And that
It's like acknowledging the uncertainty
because you're being honest.
because you're being honest.
So you can trust the person, because
Right.
they're not like,
They're not,
everything's
like,
fine.
hiding it, or you
Right.
think they're missing
So it's
it.
like, hey, this is going to be hard,
yeah.
and you know,
And that's okay.
and
We'll get through it
and,
together.
and we're going to do it because
Yeah.
we're capable of doing it.
Right.
And it is possible, but it is going to be hard. And I think that creates trust because it's like they're telling me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
They're acknowledging that it's hard. So that feels good, that it's like they're not like, this is easy, just go do it, right? They're saying, hey, this is not an easy thing to do. We're doing hard things. But you also know that they're going to do everything they can to remove whatever roadblocks are there. And you feel a sense of like, it's strength, but not an arrogant strength.
Yes.
It's a, we can do this and I've got this.
Yeah.
And I've got you.
Yes.
Like as an organization, like I've got your back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the best leaders, you almost feel like they have your back more than they have their own back. And actually, that really is a characteristic of a good leader, is the acknowledgement that if we're successful, you guys did a great job, and if we're not successful, that was on me. And so it's not like if we fail, like that takes the fear out of it, because if you fail, they're going to own it, and you're not going to get the pushback. So you're able to take more risk and do things that maybe are a little outside of your comfort zone, because if it doesn't work, they've got your back.
Right.
Another thing that stands out about, really good leaders is the things that they do that nobody sees, that you'll hear about. And so, you'll find out they called somebody and they connected them to a specialized doctor that person didn't know how to get in touch with, or wouldn't even had known that exists. Or,
I love that example, because that has nothing to do with work.
Nothing to do with
Like,
work.
it has nothing to do with work, and it has everything to do with that. Like, if the leader did that, they obviously know the person personally.
Yes.
They cared enough to find out what was going on with them. Maybe that was creating stress for the employee, and they gave them a solution to it that was going to help.
But they had to be curious enough to even know that it was happening.
And they had to care to ask.
They were engaging with them at some level.
In a personal level.
Yeah.
Not just a, how is your project going level?
Right.
How are you doing?
Right. And, that when you are that type of leader, you create a loyalty where those people will do anything for you.
Right.
And that is, that's powerful. Like when you're like, hey, I'll do anything I can for you, you're going to reciprocate and be like, wow, I want you to win.
I want you to win. I want us to win.
The company
because
to win.
Because this feels so good.
Yes. And it feels like we're a unit and we're here for each other.
I think that is the point. Someone who is able to practice all of these things is creating a true team.
Yes.
And people love being on successful teams.
Yes.
And, a lot of the time, the success of the team does come down to the presence of the leader and how they are interacting with those individuals and bringing them all together.
Yes. And so I think that's so important. The other thing that comes to mind is a leader that gets everybody's input. So they know that the issue is complex, and so they need a lot of information. So they're gathering information from everybody, and then they take that information and they make the decision. And whatever decision they make, that's on them, right? So again, it's that confidence
and taking ownership.
They take ownership of it. Of like, okay, you gave me what I needed, you did your part, but now it's up to me as a leader. And that's why being a leader is so scary, because at some point you have to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is the direction that we're going to go in. And there's no way to know, even the best leader in the world, if that's the right answer. So there's always a built-in inherent risk. And again, it goes back to the leader saying, if we're not successful, that's on me. Like, either I didn't get the right information from the people, I didn't listen, I didn't create an environment where people were willing to speak up, I didn't create an environment where people said, hey, that's a disaster, right? Like that you're not seeing that this could happen. There's something there. And if you're a good leader, you are so tapped into everything that's happening in all of people's point of view and their perspectives that you get as much data as possible that is going to help you to make the best decision possible.
I think the only thing I feel like I have to add to that is there's a lot of probably opportunities or situations today where someone in a leadership role is doing those things and they're still not successful.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's super important to frame that as a learning.
Oh, yeah.
because like
But it
there
goes,
is a lot of failure
yes, and it
today.
goes
There's
back
going
to
to be
just like there's not a leadership profile, it's not formulaic. Running the business and making decisions isn't
right.
formulaic.
So like you
even
could do all of these things
yes,
and it's still not
it's
a
not
guaranteed
guaranteed. No, but
success.
you're mitigating risk and
Yes.
you're increasing your chances for success.
Yes.
And to your point, and I think that's another great hallmark of a good leader. And we really try to do this with our team is like it's an experiment, and if we fail, we learn something, and that's okay. And like as long as we get value out of whatever that was, and we learn something, that isn't a failure.
Right. That there's productive failure if you're approaching the problem in a way that you're creating purpose, clarity, psychological safety, being aware of everybody. And then there's like less productive failure where it's like, well, this didn't work because we didn't respect each other. No one was able to speak up. People were scared. We forgot to consider this half of like the problem that we should have taken time to think about. Like, that I think are things in hindsight that you're like, oh, we didn't approach it the right way.
Yeah.
Versus, we used all of our muscles around these things and we still didn't get it across the finish line.
The other, I think, truly critical hallmark of a good leader is the belief in not only development of themselves, but the development of their people. And unfortunately, most of an organization's budget for development is concentrated at the higher end of the organization.
That's a really good point.
And not at the lower. And so it's like you're learning and reinforcing things for years and years and years that maybe aren't right. And then it's
Say that again.
so if I'm like an entry manager and I don't get development, so I'm just going about, I'm going to manage the way I think I'm supposed to manage. And I'm not getting any tools to say, hey, that's not effective or there's a better way to do it. So I'm going through a good part of my career, and it's not till maybe I'm a director or in the C-suite that the company's like,
they're really investing.
Yes. And so think about like all the bad habits and the things that the person's doing, that they're now that muscle's harder to undo.
Right.
It's if you can catch it earlier, then they have a lot more time to practice that leadership skill.
Right.
Versus being like, well, you don't get that until you're 45 years old and you're a director, and now we're going to invest in you. Well, now all these bad habits have been created, and not to mention the cost of the organization of things that they weren't handling.
Right.
And so it's really an investment at the beginning that then will pay off. But you have to have quite a bit of like strategic foresight to think that way.
Definitely. All right. So now let's move into if the big idea is that if we put less emphasis around a profile of a leader's personality and put more emphasis and energy in the ongoing development of the leader, how can Birkman specifically help with that?
Yeah, I was thinking that, it might be interesting to say, because I mean, hopefully it's clear that we are not believers in a profile for leadership and for a leader. And I would say we generally are sort of anti-profile of anything as a selection tool. So then how do you use a tool like the Birkman effectively in that process? Because like it is incredibly helpful. It's just using the tool the right way. And so the right way to use a Birkman is to understand when you're hiring someone, how is that person likely to approach communication and management, and what are their interests and what are they going to value, and are those things going to be a good fit for that position? And it's not yes or no, it really creates where's the development opportunities for that person. And so it gives you an idea of, where do we need to be careful about? What do we need to watch out for? Where do we need to help this person invest? Because they need to develop different muscles just because of how they see the world, that they need to develop muscles that are going to help them in areas that could potentially be a blind spot. So I do feel, the Birkman is a very powerful tool to use that way. But the difference is you're identifying the development opportunities.
Right.
You're not identifying if they're a fit or not.
Right.
And I think that's the big distinction.
And I think some of the best organizations that use Birkman in leadership do it post-hire.
Yes.
And I love that because I think that embodies the mindset of we're using this information as a roadmap.
Yeah.
To be able to help this person kind of chart like their development, and when things come up, it's like we can look to this information to see, oh, this is probably because if they're over indexing on this, then that's creating this impact, and let's kind of create these different behavioral muscles to be able to be successful with these specific people who we're leading in
Yeah.
this specific time with this specific problem. And every time that changes, the leader's going to have to adapt their behavior again and again and again. So we've talked a lot about blind spots. Let's talk too about the priorities of a leader and how the Birkman can help color some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think if when someone is brought on to be in a leadership role and they have a Birkman, that not only informs them, to your point, like the roadmap that they need to have or kind of their leadership brand, like how are they going to lead and what are they going to be known for? But that also then helps inform the people that work for them, because it's like, hey, this is how I show up. This is how I lead. This is how I'm going to make decisions. And then we can have a conversation about if that's not working, or if you see that like I'm decisive and you feel like I'm making decisions too quickly. Now we have the language to have a conversation around that. And I truly, like what I would call enlightened leader would say, if you start to see me doing that, I want you to call me out and I want us to have a conversation. But I mean, now we're moving way up again, as we talk about sort of like like leadership enlightenment. Like,
I love that.
I do too. But I do think it fits because it is a process of becoming like enlightened to understand leadership. And a truly strong leader, like the best of the best, is humble enough to say, I know I'm going to do this, and I'm inviting you when I do this, like call it out, because I don't want to do that. And you're going to see it before I do.
Yes, that's very, very true. And I think, again, just going back to the world and the climate that we're in right now, stress is pretty high with everything going on.
Yes.
And so having that conversation with employees and a team could probably save a lot of challenges that the team is going to face.
It's interesting.
Or at least make them easier to navigate.
At least you have some tools.
Yeah.
You have something, right? You have data and you have tools. As we know, like COVID really broke the barrier between your professional and your home life. But you know what's interesting about that is that we ever thought there was a difference.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we believed, like, no.
There was always a physical difference.
Right. Like work stays at work, and don't bring your home life to work, and don't bring work. It's like, it's so funny that we ever thought those things were separate. And like, we kind of gaslit people to be like, don't bring that to work. And it's like, okay, well, you can tell me.
Even if you think they're not, they still are, because
How
it's
can you
still in
not?
their head.
You're the same human that comes to the work, that goes home, that's dealing with all the, and to your point, it just feels more pronounced now because things do feel, there just feels like a higher level of tension kind of in every direction right now. But to that point, a good leader gets that, right? It's like, hey, I know we were talking earlier, hey, so-and-so's husband's not doing well, like they're sick. And so you're seeing a lot of stress, but like now that we know that, we're able to give that person a lot more grace. But I think a good leader acknowledges it. You are who you are, and you're going through what you're going through in life, whether you're in the office or you're at your home. It doesn't turn off.
Right.
And I think acknowledging that, and back to even saying, hey, what could I do as a leader? What are little things I could do? Not only asking about it, because even that can go a long way, but anything that they can do in their kind of world that could actually help that person out. And now, again, you're reducing stress for that person, which means you're reducing stress for the organization.
Yeah.
Like anytime you can reduce anyone's individual stress, that's reducing stress on the actual organization.
That's a really good point. I'm not sure if people think about it that way.
I don't think they do, but I mean, we live that every day, right? Like we know when someone's got a lot on their plate, it's going to impact how our meetings go. It's going to impact like the emotional load that we're carrying. And so the more we can help people manage that or mitigate that, it's less stress on them, which means it's less stress on the team, which means it's less stress on the organization. And I think that's, a huge benefit of Birkman is that once they know their needs and they can get those met, and then you have a great leader who's also helping things that are outside of maybe the Birkman world, and you're doing that at scale, like now think about the ROI of that for an organization.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah. But again, it's hard to measure those things.
Right.
But it is massive.
Right. So how do you want to kind of close us off on this conversation?
Yeah, a couple of things. So first, we started off by saying there's no profile for a leader. And I would hope, based on this conversation, when we talk about what makes a good leader, it makes it clear why you couldn't identify that in a person's personality profile or a Birkman profile. But I also think it's important to say that any person, and we speak in terms of Birkman, any Birkman profile could be an amazing leader. It's going to look different, and they're going to have a different style and a different approach. And sometimes that is the very reason they're so successful, is because they're kind of approaching in this unique way and seeing the world in a unique way. So, I think if you aspire to be a leader, you don't have to worry about, is there something in your Birkman that says you're not going to be a great leader? Because that's just not how it works. And it's interesting, and I won't name names, but you and I took an assessment about 10 years ago, which identified us both as a high-risk hire. And the reason why is because we kind of see the world in a unique way, which to this...
Kind of.
We see the world in a very unique way. That's quite different from how maybe like the statistical norm. And because we saw the world differently, that made us a high-risk hire. But the value that I think we bring to an organization is the fact that we see the world differently. Like we look at things differently, we think about things differently. And so when you're talking about innovation and sort of bringing in different points of view and challenging how the company is thinking, you need those people around, right? That's important. You need the other people too. But to only go in one direction, again, this is back to that introducing risk.
That's a great point, because the risk comes in when there isn't any self-awareness. There's very little self-management. People aren't practicing creating the purpose and the clarity and the psychological safety. They haven't built their resilience muscles. That's where the risk comes in.
Yeah.
It doesn't come in on a certain behavior we believe is not good or bad. Are some behaviors more rewarded by society? Absolutely yes. Are some behaviors more common? Absolutely yes. And there's no that's not the risky part. The risky part is when people and organizations don't want to put in the work to make it work.
Yeah.
To me, that's the risk.
Yes, absolutely. And we've talked the last episode about the practice of developing your own self-awareness. And it's like the practice of me developing myself, the practice of leadership. I think the point of all of this is any role you're playing, you have to always be working on it and thinking about it with intention and attention. Anyone that's not thinking about these things, I feel confident in this statement. Any leader that's not thinking about these things is not a good leader. Because there's just no way. It's impossible to be. If you're not constantly, and the leaders that we've had that have been really great leaders, they were always thinking about this. You could tell it was omnipresent for them of keeping sort of how are people and how am I and how am I showing up and how am I, what's working and what's not working. And it's this constant reflection and constant recalibration.
Leadership is work. Leadership is a practice. It's not just a title.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that I love that. To me, what you've walked us through today is the idea that in the mindset shift around, instead of thinking, am I a leader? It's asking yourself, am I practicing leadership?
Yes, that's it. That's it for this episode of Seen by Birkman. If this changed how you see yourself or someone else, it worked. Share it with someone who needs the conversation. See you next time.